I cheated with a coworker, but I was exposed. My husband took revenge by mercilessly annihilating me. I was left in ruins and became a ghost in my own life. My name is Cecilia. I am 30 years old, and for a long time, I was simply the woman that everyone said had won at life. I work as a logistics assistant for a large transportation company, and for many years, my routine was as predictable as it was secure. Miguel, my husband, was my opposite in everything. At 33 years old, a diving instructor, with that outdoorsy, almost wild air, always tanned, always smiling. When we met, it seemed as if fate had decided to play a game of ice and fire, and, for a while, it worked. Or at least, that is what I thought I could do. We met at a party with mutual friends. I was very serious, with my glass of wine in hand, trying to look interesting, and he was all relaxed, laughing out loud, telling stories about sharks and reefs as if he were narrating epic adventures. When our eyes met for the first time, I felt that stupid dizziness that you only feel in a bad romance movie. Miguel was different from all the men I had known. With him, everything seemed lighter, easier, more full of color. It was impossible to resist. During the first few months, it was like living with good music playing all the time. We went out every weekend to different places. Miguel took me diving, hiking to live. And I brought him into my conventional life. I introduced him to my friends and my family. He said he had never felt so welcome, so loved. And I had never felt so alive. It seemed we had found the perfect balance. He took me out of my comfort zone, and I gave him a home, stability, a future. After 2 years together, we bought a small apartment near the coast. I organized our life on paper, spreadsheets, accounts, plans. He organized our backyard, our diving closet, our trips to the end of the world. We talked about getting married, having children, growing that little world we had created together. Miguel said he wanted to see our children swim before they learned to walk, and I, foolishly, believed every word. Every promise of his seemed to be tattooed forever, more deeply on my chest. But over time, the promises began to turn into big commitments. Miguel, who before had traveled with bright eyes, now seemed tired. I, who organized my life with pleasure, began to feel that everything depended on me. Small details accumulated, a forgotten thing here, an absence there, a blank stare during dinner. But like any good idiot in love, I pretended not to see it. It is normal, I thought. That is what marriage is, ups and downs. But deep down, I already felt that we had started to lose each other. It was in this interval of silence that everything began to fall apart. Not suddenly, like in the movies, but slowly, like a hidden leak in the wall. There was still love, of course, but it was no longer that love that burns the skin and lights up the room. It was a warm, tired love, full of compromises and less of stolen kisses. And it was in this warm love that I began to look elsewhere without even realizing it. My name is Cecilia, and this is the story of how I destroyed what I cherished most. In the first few years, our routine seemed perfect to anyone looking from the outside. I worked from 8 to 6 at the logistics company, dealing with deadlines, inventory, and endless spreadsheets. Miguel taught diving classes on his free time, depending on the weather and the season. When I got home, he was already waiting for me with that smile, a simple dinner, and stories about the sea. In the eyes of others, we were the couple who had found the perfect balance between freedom and stability, but inside me a strange feeling began to grow that I had been alone my whole life. Over time, our roles crystallized. I was the one who solved everything while Miguel maintained his free, almost irresponsible soul. The pressure to have children began to appear, mainly coming from my family. "When are the grandchildren coming?" was the question at every Sunday lunch. I said we were planning, but the truth was that I was afraid of trapping Miguel even more in a life that he seemed to be starting to reject. And to be honest, a part of me also felt scared, afraid of having children with someone who was already starting to seem like a stranger. The fights were never explosive. They were cold silences, made of averted glances and deep sighs. Miguel went fishing, diving, spending days working in increasingly distant places, while I accumulated sorrows in silence. When he returned, we acted as if everything was fine. Forced smiles, automatic sex, silent dinners. The facade was still there for others, but inside the house it was like living with a roommate, not a husband. I did not know how we got there, but I knew that if we did not change soon, we would sink forever. Sometimes, sitting in bed while Miguel snored on the other side, I would look at the ceiling and wonder, where had I lost him? Or was I the one who got lost first? It was as if we were trapped in a loop: work, bills, forced dinners, pathetic attempts to revive something that was already dead. And in the midst of all this, a silent desire grew inside me, the desire to be seen as a woman again, not as an obligation. To be touched by desire, not by habit. It was in this emotional vacuum that temptations began to appear. At first, they were just innocent thoughts, coworkers who made me laugh, glances that lasted a little longer than usual. Then, WhatsApp conversations that went beyond what was necessary, compliments that I accepted with a disguised smile. I had not physically cheated on Miguel yet, but in my heart, maybe I had been cheating on him for a long time. The truth is that when loneliness becomes part of your routine, any crumb of attention feels like a feast. And that is how, without realizing it, I began to leave gaps, small gaps that would later become huge cracks. It was not for lack of love, not at that moment. It was for lack of presence, of warmth, of life. I wanted to scream inside, but the silence was stronger. And in the midst of this silence, Alejandro appeared and everything, absolutely everything, began to change. Alejandro appeared in my life like a storm in the middle of a desert. I met him at a supplier meeting at the company where I worked. He was a sales representative for an associated transportation company, dark-skinned, slightly messy black hair, an easy smile, and a confidence that seemed to fill the entire room. Unlike Miguel, who had a more relaxed and free attitude, Alejandro was intense, focused. He looked at me as if he saw every hidden part of me. He was the kind of man who made you remember that you were still desirable. The chemistry between us was immediate, and I hated myself for feeling it. The first few times we met, we limited ourselves to exchanging glances, some funny comments, nothing that could be called betrayal. But inside me, something began to move. It was as if a dormant side was awakening, hungry for attention, to be noticed, to be desired again. And Alejandro noticed. Every detail, every change in the tone of my voice, every time I fixed my hair or looked away, he would smile as if he were undressing me with just his gaze. The first concrete flirtation took place on a rainy afternoon. We had finished a long and exhausting meeting and we headed to the corner coffee shop. It was there, drinking coffee, that Alejandro lightly touched my hand with his while handing me the sugar. A quick, innocent touch for anyone who saw it, but for me it was like a lightning bolt going through my body. My heart raced and, for the first time in years, I felt those ridiculous butterflies in my stomach. He noticed and just smiled. We did not need to say anything. Everything was there, in the complicit silence. The messages started shortly after. At first, they were just conversations about work, but they soon evolved into inside jokes, disguised compliments, and veiled innuendos. Alejandro made me laugh. He made me forget for a few minutes the ice prison that my marriage had become. With each notification on my cell phone, I felt those butterflies in my stomach, that warmth in my cheeks. It was wrong, I knew it was wrong, but for the first time in a long time, I felt alive. And life, the real, pulsating life, was a drug that was hard to refuse. The first date outside of work seemed inevitable. He suggested an innocent lunch on Saturday, and I accepted without a second thought. During that lunch, sitting across from him, I felt like a different person, younger, prettier, lighter. Alejandro looked at me as if I were the only woman in the world and, although I knew it was a dangerous game, I could not back down. There was something about him that brought out the worst or the best in me and, at that moment, what I most wanted was to lose myself, even if just a little. It did not take me long to convince myself that I deserved it, that Miguel no longer cared, that I had the right to be happy, even if it was in secret. It was as if all my frustrations, pains, and needs had found a place to explode and Alejandro was there, ready to receive me, to destroy me, to save me, all at the same time. At that moment, while I was laughing at his jokes and forgetting about the world, I had already begun to cross a line I would never return from. The betrayal happened like a hurricane. Miguel was away on a trip and Alejandro sent that message that felt like it burned my skin. "I miss your scent." Without thinking, I put on a short dress, something Miguel no longer even noticed, and I headed to his apartment. When the door opened, he did not say a word. He simply pulled me by the waist and, before I could think, our mouths were already pressed together, desperate, as if there were no tomorrow. We stumbled to the bedroom, kissing, devouring each other, tearing off our clothes along the way. As soon as we fell onto the bed, Alejandro positioned himself on top of me, his warm, heavy body pressing against mine. His kisses went down from my neck to my breasts while his hands roamed every inch of my skin, as if he wanted to decorate my entire body. He turned me on my side, pulling me closer to him, kissing my back, my shoulders, murmuring things in Spanish that I barely understood, but that burned inside me. Never, ever had Miguel touched me like that, with so much hunger, with so much need. Alejandro guided me, holding me by the waist, putting me on top of him, making me sit astride his lap as if I were filled with a fire that could not be extinguished. With each movement, with each moan I tried to stifle by biting my lips, I felt the guilt dissolve into pure pleasure. He held my thighs firmly, guided me with his strong hands, looked at me as if I were his and no one else's. When our skin collided, it was as if the entire weight of my life crumbled and all that was left was that raw, visceral sensation. Then, he laid me on my stomach and crept up behind me, slowly at first, as if he wanted to prolong my torture. I buried my face in the pillow, trying to hold back my screams, but he knew exactly how to make me lose control. When he noticed I was trying to hold back, he would pull my hair back a little and force me to look at myself in the mirror on the wall. "Look at me," he whispered in a hoarse voice. And I looked. I saw in the reflection a woman I no longer recognized, sweaty, surrendered, pleading without words for him not to stop. Hours later, exhausted, we fell side by side, breathing heavily. The sweat stuck to our bodies as if we were one. He ran his hand through my hair, kissed me on the forehead, and said something about this being just the beginning. I wanted to believe that I could have that without destroying everything. But reality began to weigh on me right there, between the still warm sheets. I turned to one side, letting the tears flow in silence. It was not joy, it was not love. It was a warning. And I ignored it. From that night on, my life became a theater of lies. I invented meetings, shifts, lunches with friends. Each excuse took me a little further away from Miguel, who seemed relieved not to have to deal with the bitter woman I was becoming. And I lived in two worlds, one in which she was the devout, unhappy wife, and another in which she was the passionate, guilty lover. Every kiss I gave Miguel felt false, like a crime without immediate punishment, but with the sentence accumulating day by day. The worst part was that, at first, I believed I could control everything, that I could have Alejandro without losing Miguel, that it was possible to be two people at the same time in two separate lives. But the truth is that guilt is a slow poison. It began to eat away at me from the inside. I started to avoid looking Miguel in the eye. I invented excuses not to have sexual relations, not to talk, not to plan the future. And Miguel, poor thing, seemed confused, but still tried somehow to stop me without knowing it. It was already too late. Alejandro, on the other hand, seemed addicted to the adrenaline of our forbidden relationship. He wanted more time, more meetings, more promises. I said I needed to be discreet, that I loved my husband, a lie I told more to myself than to him. But the truth was that I was getting more and more entangled in the web we had both woven. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything exploded. And when it exploded, I would lose much more than I could imagine. At first, Miguel seemed completely oblivious. Maybe because he trusted me with his eyes closed, maybe because he did not want to see what was already in front of him. But as the months passed, my distance became impossible to disguise. The unconvincing excuses, the hidden messages, the prolonged absences began to accumulate questions in his head. He was not the suspicious type of man, but even naive people feel when love grows cold without explanation. And it was then that Miguel, in silence, began to watch me closely. I noticed his long glances when I used my cell phone, his uncomfortable silences during dinner. He did not say anything, but I saw him. And yet, he continued to play with his luck, ever more recklessly. I thought he was stupid, that he would never have the courage to distrust me. In fact, it was the opposite. He knew me so well that at the slightest deviation, his heart screamed what his reason did not want to accept. Still, Miguel continued to pretend, perhaps out of love, perhaps to give me a chance to abandon the madness I was living. Everything changed the night Miguel decided to follow me. I had invented yet another excuse. I said I was going to a company dinner. I put on a provocative dress that I did not even try to justify and left the house smelling good. Alejandro was waiting for me at a discreet restaurant on the other side of town. I had no idea that, just a few meters away, Miguel parked his car, turned off the lights, and watched me cross the street with a smile I had not seen in months, that smile I now gave to another man. What happened that night marked the end of everything. While I laughed, flirted, and touched Alejandro as if he were my boyfriend, Miguel watched from a distance, motionless, shattered. He saw my body lean towards Alejandro during dinner. He saw our hands touch under the table. He saw the stolen kiss in the parking lot when we thought we were alone. It was there, at that moment, that my husband died for me. Not physically, but in an even crueler way, in the silence of discovered betrayal, without confrontation. When I returned home that morning, Miguel was awake, sitting in the dark living room. His face was pale, empty, like an unpainted wall. He simply said, "Did you have fun?" And I, with all my courage, lied. I said it was a boring meeting, that I was tired. He smiled in a strange, bitter way and simply replied, "I am glad you had fun." Then he got up, gave me a kiss, as if saying goodbye, and went to sleep. I should have suspected it. I should have smelled the revenge in the air. But I, blinded by illusion, did not realize that Miguel was already plotting his plan. He did not confront me, he just waited. Cold, calculating. He waited for the perfect moment to destroy not only my marriage, but my entire life. And while I was getting lost more and more in Alejandro's arms, thinking I had control of everything, Miguel calmly plotted my ruin. And when he acted, I did not even have a chance to defend myself. Miguel was not an impulsive man. When he decided to take revenge, he did nothing in the heat of the moment. On the contrary, he was cold, methodical, calculating. He pretended he knew nothing. He continued to act normally, kisses, asking me how my day had been, wishing me good night with a fake smile. Meanwhile, he worked in secret, withdrawing money from our joint account, selling his equipment, and preparing his escape. And I, blinded by arrogance, did not even realize that I was being left without a foundation. The first blow was financial. One morning, I tried to pay for a purchase, and my card was declined. I thought it was a bank error, but on the same day I discovered that our joint account had been emptied. Miguel, of course, feigned surprise. "It must be fraud," he said, hugging me as if we were in it together against the world. Basically, he had already transferred everything to a personal account, inaccessible to me. All that was left were the debts, the bills, and the shame that I did not even know I was about to feel. Still, while I was frantically trying to understand what was happening, Miguel was preparing the cruelest blow, my public humiliation. He gathered all the evidence of my betrayal, photos, messages, screenshots of conversations. He sent everything to my family, to my friends, to my boss. There was not a single person who knew me who did not have access to the images of me kissing Alejandro in parking lots, holding hands in hotel hallways, laughing like a teenager in love. In a matter of hours, my reputation turned to dust. Alejandro did not escape either. Miguel knew where he worked and sent copies of the evidence to the company's board of directors. Result: Alejandro was fired almost immediately, accused of inappropriate conduct and breach of ethical contract. In addition, Miguel made a point of sending the evidence to Alejandro's wife. Yes, he was also married. His house became a battlefield. The last I heard was that Alejandro lost everything: his job, his marriage, and any trace of dignity he had left. After making sure that there would be nothing left for the two of them, Miguel disappeared. He left no letter, no note, nothing. He simply emptied the apartment, taking everything that was his and also some of what was mine. When I came home that night, after having been fired, humiliated, and abandoned, I only found an old mattress on the floor and an eviction notice on the door. The only thing left was the echo of the destruction that I myself helped create. And deep down, although I cried, although I felt empty, I knew that I deserved every second of that pain. Miguel destroyed me with the same calm with which I destroyed our marriage. Not with screams, not with violence, but with intelligence, coldness, and a surgical precision that left me speechless. In a short time, I lost my husband, my stability, my image, my friends. Alejandro, who promised to be the refuge of my dreams, turned to dust in the wind. And I was alone, looking at myself in the mirror, trying to understand at what exact moment I had chosen this path. But the truth is that deep down, I always knew always. The impact of the fall was much worse than I imagined. The first few days I walked around the empty house like a ghost, not knowing what to do or where to run. Messages from old friends disappeared one by one. Calls from my family were filled with shame and disappointment. No one wanted to listen to me. No one wanted to understand me. In their opinion, I was the woman who destroyed a good man, and, although I tried to justify it, deep down I knew it, I really was that woman. The job opportunity did not take long to slip through my fingers either. After copies of my conversations and photographs reached my superiors, I was summoned to a conduct evaluation meeting. They tried to disguise it as something formal, but I knew I was already doomed. I left the room with a letter of resignation and the critical gazes of colleagues who until weeks before had praised my competence. It was as if I had ceased to exist. All that was left was the label of a traitor. Without a job, without money, and without friends, the isolation became unbearable. I spent entire days without leaving the house, staring at the bare walls of the empty apartment I once called home. Sometimes I cried until I fell asleep. Other times, I just sat staring into space, feeling the shame and loneliness crushing me. The pain was physical, like an invisible hand squeezing my chest. And as much as I tried to convince myself that Alejandro could still be my safe haven, he also disappeared without a trace. Alejandro did not look for me, not a message, not an apology. After losing his job and his wife, he disappeared from the map. They blocked me on all social networks. I, who risked everything for a fantasy, found myself abandoned like a disposable mistake. It was as if he had erased every trace of our history, as if I had never existed. Knowing this hurt me more than I was willing to admit. Miguel destroyed me, Alejandro forgot me, and I was left alone with the consequences of the decisions I made. For weeks, I tried everything to find Miguel. I called, I sent messages, I looked for mutual relatives, but he had erased every trace of his previous life. No address, no number, no email. It was as if he had evaporated. The truth is that for Miguel, I died that night he saw me with Alejandro, and I knew that if I were in his place, I would have done the same. Knowing that I would never have the chance to apologize, to try to fix things, was the worst punishment of all. In the end, all I had left was what was left, myself, a pale shadow of the woman I once was. The nights were the worst. I would lie in bed, hugging the empty pillow, silently begging for time to rewind. But time, cruel, only pushed me forward, towards a future where I was only remembered as the woman who threw everything away for a few nights of illusion. And above all, it was impossible to escape the truth that accompanied me like a ghost. Guilt is the worst prison of all. After days submerged in my own shame, I found the courage to try to get Miguel back. I did not know how, I did not know where to start, but I needed to try. I sent messages apologizing, begging for a chance to talk, to explain. Every unanswered look was like a new knife stuck in my chest. And still I insisted. I sent long messages, I cried while writing as if the words could erase the pain I caused. Deep down, I knew he would never answer. I even went to his parents' house desperate. I knocked on the door like a beggar asking for alms. His mother opened it, looked at me with such contempt that I felt smaller than an ant. Go away, Cecilia. You have already destroyed enough. The door closed in my face before I could say anything. There, on the sidewalk, with my face wet with tears, I understood. In Miguel's world, I no longer existed. I was just a stain, a shame that everyone wanted to forget. I started sending messages to mutual friends, trying to get information about where Miguel might be. The answers were always the same: I do not know. He is gone. You better move on. Each failed attempt was a brutal confirmation of how strange I had become to everyone who had once welcomed me. Even those friends I considered brothers disappeared, as if my betrayal were contagious, as if my presence embarrassed them. And maybe, in a way, they were right. The worst moment was when I tried to look for Miguel at his old job. I went by the diving center, in disguise, hoping to see him, to get some news. But all I found was a new instructor, a new life, as if Miguel had never been there. No one wanted to talk to me, no one even looked at me with pity. It was as if my story had been erased, as if I had been replaced as easily as a page torn from an old notebook. As the months passed, I realized that life went on for everyone but me. Probably, Miguel had already started over somewhere else, with other people, maybe even with another woman. Alejandro, this was just a distant echo, a mistake I could never fix. I, on the other hand, was stuck in the same place, looking back, picking up the pieces of what I myself had destroyed. And with each failed attempt at contact, I sank deeper into the despair of knowing that the door was already closed forever. Looking back, I understand that betrayal not only destroys love. It destroys respect, memory, identity. What I tried to save with tears and pleas for forgiveness was already dead long before my pathetic attempts. Miguel did not need to hate me to leave me behind. The simple fact that I was not enough to hold him was punishment enough. There is nothing more painful than realizing that, after all, the person you destroyed has moved on and you are left behind, alone. Today, afterwards, I still carry the consequences of my choice, like a tattoo that does not wash off. I work in temporary jobs, far below my qualifications. I accept what comes my way, always looking over my shoulder as if the shame could still catch up with me. I moved to a small town where no one knows my past, where no one whispers behind my back when they see me pass by. But not even the distance was enough to silence the voice in my head that, day and night, reminds me I ruined my own life. Miguel, for me, became just a ghost. Sometimes I wonder how he is doing if you rebuilt your life, if you found someone you knew how to love truly. I would like to say that I support his happiness, but that would be a lie. A part of me still poisons me with the idea that he could be happy while I carry this open scar. It is petty, it is small, I know, but betrayal not only destroys others. It also rots something inside us, something that sometimes never blooms again. The nights are still my worst punishment. I lie in an empty bed, I look at the dark ceiling, and I relive every detail, every wrong choice, every lie told. Sometimes I dream of Miguel. In the dream, he still smiles at me like he did before everything happened. I wake up crying, missing something I no longer have the right to wish for. And on nights like this, the loneliness weighs so much that I can almost hear the sound of my own heart breaking again. I try to build new relationships, but it is as if something in me has died. I do not trust anyone, and what is worse, I do not trust myself. Every time someone gets close, I back away, remembering the monster I was capable of being. I remember that I once promised someone eternal love, and that I broke that promise with my own hands. How can I trust feelings now? How can I believe that I deserve a new chance? Sometimes I think that I have been born again, but I was born wrong, incomplete, stained. On some good days, I can pretend that everything is fine. I smile at my coworkers, I watch stupid series on television, I shop at the market as if I were a normal person. But all it takes is a familiar smell, a song that played on our walks, for everything to come back to life. The shame, the regret, the longing, everything comes like a wave that drags me down. And I go because, deep down, I know that I deserve every tear, every moment of pain, every emptiness that I carry in my chest. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone who is thinking of cheating, it would be simple: do not do it. Because you do not just betray the other person. You betray yourself, you betray your story, you betray the person you could have been. You become a shadow of what you once were, and sometimes shadows never become light again. I am Cecilia, and my story is a living reminder that a moment of pleasure can cost a lifetime of regret.